Friends, in the meantime, can we, even before they present, can we put our hands together for the listeners group? Thank you. Thank you. I'll hand over to Janet, who take us through.
Sorry, we've just lost a listener. Philippa, are you here? She's listening so well. So, hello, and I'm not sure that we all know all the listeners, so can I just introduce to you, starting from that side, Dumisile and Albert. I'm Janet. This is Morte and Kangwa and Philippa. And we were tasked with listening to what's been happening for the last 2 days. Listening to, obviously, the words that have been spoken, many, 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 many words, but also listening to some of the silences, listening to some of the body language. And we're going to produce a full report. And you'll probably be very happy to hear we're not going to give a very long, wordy report this afternoon. So what we're going to do is that each one of us is going to highlight one, or at very most, 2 things that have struck us over the last 2 days, just as a reflection back to you on what we've heard and seen, and then we will produce the full report for you once the conference is over. May I start with you, Dumisile? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. From the things that I heard when I was in the groups or the discussions, as Janet has said, I'm going to speak about one point that I heard and that I grasped. From the drama performance that was demonstrated to us in the afternoon yesterday, it kind of summed up the one point that I'm going to talk about, where there was one who was trying to talk and no one was listening. So it's kind of the feeling that I had when I was listening in the group, that the LGBTI members are trying to talk, but no one is willing or is ready to listen. So that was kind of, to me, was like a frustration from the LGBTI that they have from being ignored or not given recognition they deserve from the churches, as well as the inclusivity that lacks, and yet Jesus said or commanded us to love one another. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to succinctly present what kind of captivated me in light of what was discussed in these past 2 days. And I would like to relate it to the 2 centers of agency that I picked out. We had the center, which is center in quotes, and then the periphery. So in the periphery, that's where we find the groups of agency, like the LGBTI persons within the church, and then the center, which has the institutions and the teachings of the church. And the basic struggle lies in the center, where we find the teachings and the institutions of the church, or the traditions. We've just seen the Pope stating some kind of idealistic, approach to what is happening. He could be stating his own opinionated agency. However, within the center and the periphery, there is agency. The situation is that the tradition and the teachings are the problem, and that's what we are all struggling for. In the group here, we have both religious leaders. We also have the members of society or members of the LGBTI that are also centering their agency. So where do we go from here? I think for me, what I've picked up is that we need to bridge these 2 centers of agency so that we can approach what we call the tradition, what we call the sacrosanct teachings that are relatively denying everyone life.
As one of the listeners, I have repeatedly heard that there is an urgent need for more theological resources to occupy the space, this Kairos moment, the space. And also I have heard there is an urgent need for pastoral resources on LGBTI, that minimum pastoral guideline for ministering to LGBTI. And also, there is a need for documentation of lived experiences, real stories of LGBTI, because the stories could be a powerful tool for social change.
Well, I've heard and also witnessed in this gathering the tremendous progress that has been made in this struggle. And while celebrating progress can sometimes bring about complacency, I think there's need for us to celebrate, because as we are reminded by Judge Cameron also, celebration brings hope. That we must, even these small progress, big progress, we must be able to celebrate and acknowledge them. In my group, we're talking about resources, and immediately, several were able to say, we can do this immediately. So that's progress that has been made, and I think it must be celebrated.
I think what I heard was the gap between our academic and our theological knowledge and tools, and the application of those tools at a grassroots level. So we have clergy that know how, that have the hermeneutical tools to help us unpack these difficult texts. But I don't think we can assume that all clergy have those robust tools. And I know I, for one, would like to be more engaged with groups that can teach me how to take this into my local church, so that I'm not only empowered to speak my own story, but that I'm able to take people on that story with me. And that, I think, then leads us into what has also come up about sacred and safe space. So as a clergy woman on her own, how do I say to people, you are welcome in my church, as with this being a sacred and a safe space, if I'm not sure the congregation is with me? How do I then make sure I'm able to mobilize members of my congregation to then say, can we go out and find another space that is safe? Because we've also heard bringing people in is not necessarily the same as meeting them when they feel, where they feel safe. And so how do we bridge the gap between our theoretical knowledge and our application thereof, so that we can create spaces where people feel safe and are able to then either do it in the church or outside of the church, where people feel the most safe and the most able to speak?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do 2.5 things instead of 2. What did I hear? I heard a lot around claims of what is and isn't African. And I think that that's something that could be opened up and explored a little bit more. A gap that I found absolutely overwhelming was the absence of church leaders at a particular level. There are many of us who are ministers in congregations, but I don't really see people from a much more managerial level of the church, if I could put it that way. And then the thing that I was also hoping to hear and didn't was more about disruptive practices. And if I could use one example from the struggle for the ordination of women. Dina Cormick, whom some of you will know, is a Roman Catholic woman and frustrated by her own church's failure to recognize women's ministries. And for many years, she went to church. She's given up now. But when she did go to church, she went to church wearing a long white dress and a stole, a scarf, but it was a stole. And that was an embodied disruption of the failure to recognize women's bodies in the sanctuary. And I was hoping we might hear more of those disruptive strategies in the LGBTI struggle. But maybe that was happening in the small groups and we didn't hear it. But thank you very much for allowing us into your spaces to listen to your stories. And when we do compile the report, which is going to happen over the next week, I'd really value any feedback that you would like to feed through to me to make sure that it gets into the report. And so if you want to feed anything through Neville or through one of the other organizers, please let me know and we will include your particular voice if you particularly want something included in the report. Thanks very much indeed.